In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we thank Almighty God Allah for his coming in the person of Master Farah Muhammad. We thank him for raising up the most humble and honorable Elijah Muhammad. We also thank him for, we thank both of them for their leaving in our midst, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I'd like to greet you all with the greeting words of peace and paradise. He said in the Arabic language, Assalamu alaikum. We thank you all for tuning in. And as before we get started, as always, we just want to go through some of our preliminary announcements and different little things just to keep at the forefront of our mind why we do what we're doing. So if you can hear me in the comments, please do something. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Make sure that you can, yes, you all can. One second. Okay, let's see somebody in the chat. Gotcha. See. All right, so guess that means that you all can hear me. So thank you. Assalamu alaikum, brother Eric. So dear brothers and sisters, as you see today, we have with us special guest sister, Traci C. Muhammad. And I first knew of this because she was in the mosque in the state of Louisiana in Baton Rouge. Then she went to Houston, and now she's in that hot state of Arizona in the city of Phoenix. So before we bring our sister on, just want to go through some of our preliminary stuff and explaining, as I said, why we do this. This is from a letter written by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on December the 1st, 2001. Letter to President George Bush Jr., where he writes, quote, "I write you from my prison, a prison without bars that has been made for me because of the passion for truth and justice out of which I speak, and the propaganda that makes me appear to many as anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, anti-gay. None of these names accurately describe who I am. I hope that you will open your heart to what I'm writing, notwithstanding the prison from which I'm writing." And that was in 2001. And since then, social media has taken off. And by Allah's grace, I think that we can say that social media has provided an opportunity for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to get out of that prison in people's minds, because now people are able to hear his words for themselves, and they can actually see that he's not anti-gay, not anti-Semitic, not anti-white, and he's not anti-Christian. And so what we want to do to further assist in that mission is bring people who've had the opportunity to be with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, to interact with him, to witness him in his interactions with others, so that they can give their testimonies. And you know, we're going to also have people who have not had the opportunity to physically meet the minister, but nonetheless, they've been touched by his words, they've been touched by his writings, and they've been touched by his impact on the world. So you hear where it says these are some of the surveys that we did. 90%, over 90% of the people who have watched these testimonies say that these testimonies have helped them in their faith personally and helped them as a believer. And also 90% say that they have helped them to gain a greater understanding of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, which is our goal. And some of the brief little comments that we received, one person said, quote, "The testimonials have helped me in the understanding the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on how to never give up, keep striving for excellence no matter how hard life gets." Someone else says, "It has strengthened me because when I hear of the interactions of others with him, some of the testimonials are so humorously animated." Get these people coming in. Are so humorously animated and heartfelt that I somehow feel closer to him. And this is one of the goals that we are trying to do. So as we continue to ask you every week, subscribe to our YouTube page at Mosque 46AV and our Instagram page at Mosque_46. And also make sure to take an opportunity to look at these playlists that we put together. One, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's words are being used to defend against the false charges of anti-Semitism, and the playlist that's talking about the whole Malcolm controversy. In addition to that, as we say, we have a prayer group here in our city of New Orleans. If you have anybody that's interested or in need of prayer, please reach out to us. You can do it via email, you can do it via social media, and we would greatly appreciate that. And in addition, what we're doing right now our website is down. So this website link is temporarily not working. If you want to make a contribution to our effort to pay off our mortgage, you can do it at Cash App, $Mosque 46, and we will be coming up with another way for people to contribute as well. So inshallah, on next month, which is September, what we're going to do is a theme dealing with music, right? And so we have one of the guests that we have that we're going to have during this month. We're going to have up, inshallah, on next Sunday is our brother Cam Muhammad. And if you're familiar with him, you'll know the work that he's done, and you'll know about the music that he has done as well. And but today, who we have with us today, our sister Traci Muhammad. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and we're going to get right on down to this interview. Got it. All right, we're going to bring our sister up. So get her in. There she is. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Traci.
Alaikum
You're on mute. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm getting. Yeah, you're off of mute right now. Thank you for Thank you for joining us, and thank you for willingly accepting the invitation to be a guest on this show. And we look forward to hearing your testimony, and give your husband the greetings as well. I know he's somewhere around. Give him the greetings, and we're going to get straight to it. You know, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Baba.
Good. Praise be to Allah. So, one of the joys that I get out of doing these interviews is that I have the opportunity to hear how many people have come to the Nation of Islam. And we also get the opportunity to create chances for believers to hear the testimonies of other believers as well, and how they came to the teachings of the Most High Elijah Muhammad. So can you share with those who are viewing how you first heard the teachings of the Most High Elijah Muhammad, and what sealed your decision to want to join?
I actually first heard the teachings when I was roughly 15.
Your sound is low.
The sound is down. Okay, hold on one second. I first heard the
That's
teachings.
better.
That's better. Okay, I first heard the teachings when I was 15. And I have to go back in order to come forward. As we would say in the church, I got my call very early. So I was roughly 6, 7 years old. I was a child minister at 7. And it all began, this journey began with a question. I was attending the church related school, going to church Monday through Sunday. I was church, everything. And I had a question that my teacher could not answer. And I wasn't satisfied with how it was handled with respect to the question. So on Wednesdays, those of you who came out the United Methodist Church are familiar with the fact that we would have Vespers on Wednesdays. And I went to Vespers, which is where the pastor would speak to the students and everything like that. And I asked in front of the entire school, roughly about 200 other students. And my question was, if God created everything, who created God? And wow. I was promptly shut down. Mind you, I'm like 7, 8 years old. I have been ministering for a couple of years, at least a year and a half at that point. And that question did not go over well. And so they promptly ended the meeting and we got sent home for the day. Well, what I didn't know was that the other children obviously had the same question. So everyone was asking their parents. So when we got back later on that night for a Bible study, there was a big uproar over the fact that I'd asked the question. And long story on that aspect short, we were asked.
Yeah, you can share it.
Oh, no, it's okay. We were asked to leave. And so I left the school, left the church. And that put me on a quest because I still had the question. And so from roughly 9 years of age to about 14 and a half, 15, I literally studied everything that I could. I was 11 years old. Those of you who are familiar with Ernest Holmes' Science of the Mind, I'd read that at 11. So it's a deep drive for me. And I read a book finally by Robert H. Brisbane called Black Activism. And in that book, there were exactly 2 chapters, one on the Nation of Islam as an entity, and then one on Malcolm X. And in the chapter on the Nation of Islam, they spoke more of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And because I'd never encountered the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I went on a quest to find more information. And I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I just kept looking. And then finally, there was an article, and I actually still have the article, matter of fact, that was in the Ford Times newspaper regarding the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I cannot remember if he was coming to Houston to speak or if he had been there or something had happened. But literally, when I saw the minister's face, after having read some of the quotes from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that were in that book, I went and I began, this was before internet, I began researching, and I got a copy of Message to the Black Man. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad answered my question. If God created everything, who created God? He answered my question. And so by that time, I'm 15 and a half, going on 16, and I knew that I was born to be in the Nation of Islam. And so I have been in since then. And in the teachings, officially fully registered in 91 when I became of age and I was legally able to do so. But that has been my life. So it started with
Wow. And so at the age of, you say you were 7 or 8, when you asked that question, because they couldn't answer, they asked you and your family to leave the church? Wow, that's amazing. What did your parents tell you about asking such a question?
My mother she tells a story, it's kind of laughable at this point. She was already branded a heretic.
Your volume went down again.
I'm sorry. My mother had already been branded a heretic, so she just felt like I was just going along in the line of things. But one thing that she always instilled in me was the desire to learn and to know, and the curiosity, not just a cursory curiosity, but a curiosity to chase down what it is that you're thinking about. And so the value of a woman lies in the curiosity of her mind to learn, to grow, to develop. And so that is very much a part of the ethos of my family, which is like a lot of Black families dominated by women. And so that journey was what it was. And the ironic thing I found out a little bit later in my journey in Islam is that all of the men in my family were actually Masons and the women had been Eastern Stars. I was also able to speak with my grandfather before his transition, and I learned that in 1932, he was actually in Detroit, Michigan, and according to him, he did in fact see and meet Mustafa Muhammad. I didn't have the presence of mind at the time to ask him why he chose the Masonic path, but that's after that meeting, but he did come back, and that's what he did.
Wow.
Yes,
That is an amazing story and experience. And you said at that young age, after you found the answer, you knew you were supposed to be where you are now.
Correct.
It's amazing. In preparing for this interview, I was watching Dr. Wesley's recent presentation that he did on Yaqub. And he started talking about how there were 2 aspects of our theology that he wanted to make sure that he could reasonably understand. One was Yaqub, the other one was the mother plane. And he said until he understood those things, he needed to get that done in order to seal his decision to be a part of the Nation of Islam. Was there any aspect, even like was there any aspects of the teachings that you needed more understanding of that before you got to the point where you say, yo, I'm all the way with this? When your sound again. Your sound is going in and out.
Sure, what? Is it better?
Let me hear. It's going in and out. Yeah. If you have some headphones, you might put the headphones in. You got that. Little buds. Okay. So until she's getting that together, brothers and sisters, but that was very interesting to hear that at a young age she asked such a very thought-provoking question, and to find that question was answered in the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and automatically, you know. So that is beautiful to say that she was able to quickly get that and understand it. Let me see, bring her back. Here we go. Oh, who's that? Got to come off your camera. Unmute. There you go. All right, take your mute off. Can we hear you now? Yeah, right now it goes, but then it goes in and out.
Okay. I'm not sure.
So
I'm not sure why. Hold on, give me one more. Let me check.
go ahead. Go ahead. So while she's checking and dealing with that, let me show you all this for those who are just coming on. Make sure you spread the word that on next Sunday, we're going to have our brother Cam. So make sure you all spread the word, okay? Come back if she's ready.
Can you hear me now?
That's better. So hopefully it's good. So wow. So yeah. So the question was there any aspect of the teachings that you had to get, you know, that when you first heard it, you was like, wow, I need to find out more about that, or you just everything was just hit the ground running?
No, I hit the ground running. Once he answered my question, that was all I needed to know, and I was good to go from there. And I have honestly not had a question at any given point in time that was not answered by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad through a lecture or a book, or by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan or Mother Tanya.
So, and what was your first experience like going to the mosque for the first time?
It felt like home, because I came out of a kind of a holiness type of atmosphere in church and stuff. So it just matched it. The only difference, I missed the music. And so even to this day, I still like very good gospel music. I like old gospel, you know, like Shirley Caesar, Hold My Mule type gospel. But other than that, I did not have a problem. I didn't have a problem converting with respect to dress or anything like that. And you got to remember, I was 16, and I had been ministering since I was 7. So I didn't have, I was very blessed. I didn't have a lot of the struggles that sometimes believers, in particular sisters, will have, changing the dress and the attire and everything like that. Because I came from an atmosphere where we wore long dresses. We didn't go to clubs, things of that nature. So it wasn't a big transition for me. The diet wasn't a big transition. Like I said, I feel like I was born to be in the Nation of Islam because it was such a relaxed transition for me. It was very natural.
Wow. That's interesting. You talk about how many of the things that some of the sisters might have difficulty with, it wasn't for you. That leads me to my next question. You know, one of the misunderstandings about women in Islam that is intentionally spread by the enemy of our faith, and also is this misconception, a misunderstanding is fed by the mispractices of some of those in the Islamic world. And that misunderstanding is that women cannot or should not be educated. But you have multiple degrees, right? And I saw a video last night. You have a degree in library science, but something else. It was continental something, right? So you can explain that. So, but my question: can you share with the audience your educational background?
I will share part of it. I do have a master's in library and information science. I also have bachelor in philosophy with the concentration in what they call continental philosophy. I did my understudies in history and theology, and then I have a bachelor's in political science, and I'm a certified Scrum Master. So, and I'm currently pursuing a degree in data science.
Wow. So what is that continental philosophy? What is that?
Continental philosophy deals more with the existentialistic aspects of God existing, and whether or not the human being can access God as a human. And so, which more specifically, the reason that I was interested in is because in philosophy, what you find is that God is over here and you are over here, and there's an abyss in between. Well, of course, by the time I was in college, I had the teachings. And so I knew that God was a man. I knew he was a human being. I understood the line of succession, if you would, and how Allah, Creator Allah to Master Fard Muhammad, what happened in that line. What I was more looking at is the philosophical dynamics that our people go through in understanding or bridging that gap that Allah, God, is personally and intimately acquainted with you and interested in you, which is why I believe that this time is such a blessing and a magnificent time that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, following, or rather lifting up from Isaiah that we are to enter into our chambers. When you really understand what a chamber is, then you understand this time is a time of purification and holiness for us. Because in the scriptures, when you look at the scriptures, chambers are used for three things. You have the prayer chamber, you have the bridal chamber, and you have the birthing chamber. In the prayer chamber, what we find is the threshing floor, which a lot of my Christian sisters and brothers will understand. On the threshing floor is where the wheat is beaten in order to separate the tares from it. And so when we go to the threshing floor in prayer, what we're going there for is that we are asking God to take out of us that which is unlike him, that is unusable to him. So that's one aspect of chamber. A secondary aspect of chamber is the bridal chamber, where the husband and the wife go. That is used in scripture symbolically to represent the marriage of God in Christ to the believer. So once you have what's in you taken out of you that's not of God, that is unusable, that does not afford you to come close to God, you enter into a marriage situation where God is now one with you and you are one with God. And from there, we go to the birthing chamber where we are birthed out a new beginning and a new life. And so the scriptures, as well as the supreme wisdom, bear witness that can you not see that a new thing is being done? And so my interest in continental philosophy and in theology is strictly on that line with respect to the schools that I've been to and the things that I have studied. How do you make God a reality in your own life? And what the greatest tool that we have to allow that to happen is self-improvement, the basis for community development. Because we are in a communion with Allah God in our lives. Does that make sense?
Wow, yeah, that makes very sense. I'm still processing what you said about the chambers. That was
Oh, yes.
heavy. It's interesting, like you in regards to philosophy, because when I was at in college, there were students who, even though they may have been, they hated to take any philosophy courses because it will put tough questions to them about God. And some people will say, people go on HBCUs, they go into these philosophy classes believing in God, and they leave out not believing in God. Like, what was the experience for you as a Muslim, follower of the Most High Elijah Muhammad? And did you have any debates with where you had to, I'm just gonna say it, you're very intelligent, you shut down a professor and let them know that God exists?
Well, first off, I went to, when I say all white, I mean all white Catholic school. And it is what is called a papal school, which means it is directly attached to the Vatican. So I was one of, I think at that time, 5 Black students on the campus.
Wow.
So that was always, you always in defense mode when you're in that type of environment.
Wow.
With respect to the instructors, I think that one thing we need to all, as believers and as Black people in general, adopt from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the posture of student. So I can sit here and I can have a conversation with you about Mariology. I can talk about any aspect of the Catholic Church with respect, because that's what I learned from my teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I didn't have to go in a combative mode. I know that you don't know what I know. And so I can be arrogant and beat you with it, or I can come get the information that I came for and I can roll out and do my thing. And that is the approach that I took with it. I respect what they know. I respect the fact that Catholicism is a logocentric religion. I respect the fact that Islam is logocentric, meaning that it is a study center. You cannot effectively practice Islam if you do not study. That is a absolute. The God, when he self-created himself, he studied what? Himself. And so we're invited into that same course of study. So I never had to get into some combative conversation because I felt like that was beneath the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And every time I step on a campus, I step anywhere, I know that I may potentially be the closest person that they will ever see that's with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so I want my representation to be something he can be proud of. And so I try to act in a stellar manner because I want you to see the minister, because a lot of people will judge us based on the followers. And so the minister is subconsciously judged based on the fact that how we follow him. And so I don't ever want to be a stumbling block to anyone. You make your own decision.
Wow, very good. So powerful. What made you get a degree in library science?
I have a particular affinity for information, for knowledge, for the organization of information specifically. Because there's a lot of information, but the organization of it is a particular challenge. And so until Master Fard Muhammad came, until the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we did not have an organized transition of information. One of the things that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad speaks on is the study of history and the fact that it's best rewarded because you get the motives and the springs for people's activities. When you go to school, they tell you everything but why. Why is critical. If you don't know why they had the American Revolution, if you don't know why the Mau Mau rose up, if you don't know why the Boer Wars occurred, then you don't know the critical steps that led the people to take the actions and the activities that they did. And so we study history, but we study it in a disorganized, fragmented way. And so we're not able to connect incidences. We should not be in 2020 with George Floyd and Jacob Blake and not be talking contextually about Emmett Till, which is not that far back. And so the organization of information I learned by reading the Supreme Wisdom. I read about the library in Cairo, the books that were there and at Al-Azhar, and I began to understand that this is a critical component. And to step back just a little bit on the philosophy, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan spoke on the campus of Texas Southern University. And during that lecture, he stated very clearly that we needed to learn about Plato, we needed to learn Socrates, we needed to learn Descartes, but we needed to go beyond that. And so that combination of the minister's words, in addition to us reading in the Supreme Wisdom about Al-Azhar and looking at how the Supreme Wisdom has laid out the lessons and how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's words and sentences were structured, even in the theology of time, I understood that there is a layer that mathematically we're not accessing because we go about things in a disorganized fashion. That's why I ended up with library science and data science now.
Wow.
I will tell you something, that there is something called authority control in library science. Authority control means the vocabulary. For example, 30 or 40 years ago, the term cookery was a very popular and normal verbiage. When we get into the 90s and you see the advent of cable TV and ultimately culinary shows, culinary became the word. Well, you have a knowledge gap there. People didn't know to look for cookery. They were looking for culinary. And so they were missing a massive amount of information. Authority control means this: I determine what a word means and how it's used. So for example, the Inuit, the Eskimo in Alaska, they have over 4,000 words for snow. Snow. I just know snow. I know I don't like snow. That's why I live where I live. But they have 4,000 words for snow. So if I go talk to a native Inuit person and they're using all different terms to describe snow, I'm confused. So authority control steps in and says that, okay, when we respect the fact that the Inuit have all of these words, however, when we're having a conversation, we just gonna say snow. That way we won't have an argument about snow, but we'll just say snow, and that's the authority control, and that's how I can find it. And from there, I can drill down deeper into the words and what you mean, your intonation. However, but for right now, for the conversation, that's what it is. And so within the context of authority control, what they are trying to do, for example, with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, to say that he's an anti-Semite, is that they are symbolically attaching a word linguistically in your mind to produce a visceral reaction in you every time you hear that word, so that you will think about the minister and you will not critically evaluate his words. And so authority control is profoundly important. It would help us even in our interpersonal communication if we agree that this means this when we're talking. It doesn't negate what you know, it doesn't negate your culture, it doesn't negate where you come from, but for the purposes of this conversation, this is what we mean.
Wow. Woo, powerful, powerful. I was listening to an interview that you did. It wasn't an interview. I think this was like a kind of like a it was like a video where you were talking about a course that you were going to conduct.
Yes.
And you mentioned several times in this little 2-3 minute clip, you mentioned about how the Most High Elijah Muhammad, you said the 4-fold level proof method.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Can you elaborate on what that actually is?
Yes. There are 4 levels, 4 being the number of foundation that we all have to go through in order to prove. To be able to say something is real, you need theology. You need to know and come from the perspective of God. Can you find it evidentiary in science? Can you find it in nature? And is it mathematically sound? If you reach those 4 threshold points, then we can say this is factual. This is something that we can look at and do. So by way of example, again, the chamber. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has ordered us into our chambers. We can find that scripturally by looking at what the use of the chamber is, which we just discussed. We can find it in science because they're saying that we need to quarantine and we need to isolate. We can find it in nature. When things want to commune, they go into a chamber, a burrow, or something of that nature, and they rest and they recuperate. We can find it there. Mathematically, it's sound because the mathematics is that the first law of nature is self-preservation. So we are trying to live. And so mathematically, the chances of you being exposed, if you take the appropriate measures, diminish greatly. So this pestilence does not touch you. So that's the 4-fold method.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. And I hope that those who are watching that we're really taking notes on what you said. Because now after this is all, I'm going to look up those, do some studying more in depth on chamber. That was power. And that's going to be a clip we're going to end up posting as well.
Yes,
in your interview that you did with Sister Ava, you was on one of her shows, and she brought you on to announce that you all were beginning it was going to be held on Monday. I don't know if you all still do it, but it was Women in Ministry, right?
Yes, sir.
And can you talk about the purpose of that series and why it is important for women to be involved in ministry? And you all clarified that, a lot of times we hear the word ministry, we just think about a rostrum. So can you talk about that?
Yes, it is very important. There is a thing called balance in the universe. When something is out of balance, the weight is not evenly distributed. And when the weight is not evenly distributed, it causes a disruption. Women in ministry simply means that women are endowed with, and we understand that the woman is the second self of God, and she is able to speak from a feminine perspective on the divine teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and on God. That the woman has a viewpoint of God that is not necessarily the same as the man, not in hostility, it's just that I have a different viewpoint. So as I'm looking at you, Brother Willie, on the screen, I see your background. That's a different viewpoint. You see my background. That's a different viewpoint. But we're still having a conversation, and it doesn't negate either background. Now, with respect to what is ministry, is the question that we need to actually ask. Ministry it does include the evangelical on the rostrum, but most importantly, ministry is what I call community-based ministry, meaning that wherever you are a minister. Where you stand, how you act in the grocery store, that's a ministry to someone. Can you say a kind word to a child that looks like he's having a rough day? Can you speak a gentle word to an elder as you pass them? Do you even make eye contact with someone? That is ministry. Community-based ministry is also what a dear friend of mine, Sister Sudan Muhammad out of Washington, D.C., what she does. And that is passing out meals to our people on the street who are hungry. That is a ministry. Whatever you do that you do well, that you enjoy, you can turn that into a service that we provide to our people. And ultimately, that is the absolute goal, in my humble opinion, of ministry. Can I meet your need where you have your need? And so if your need is food, that's fine. I work with a sister, helped her. She enjoys super couponing. So I was like, go down to the WIC office, find some sisters down there and teach them how to super coupon so that they can maximize the dollars and continue to move forward. I have individuals that I've worked with, they enjoy reading. Go teach somebody to read, go read to the elders. That's ministry. You have a gift, and your gift is required in this hour. It is a requirement. It's no longer a luxury to sit at home waiting for a mystery God to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, it's time for you to go out there. No, go out there. Minister. Can you write well? Write something. Write an encouraging word on Facebook. Write an encouraging word on Instagram. God knows we need it in this hour. But be a light in a very dark place. And trust me, those that are in the world that are looking for light, they will recognize you. You don't have to tell a bug to find a light when you cut the light on the porch. They will appear. It's going to happen. You do not, in the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, you do not need permission to do righteousness. You do not need permission to do good. That came with you because Allah created you. And because he created you and you are an extension of his thought process, that means that he has something for you to do on his behalf and with him, and he will help you and guide you and take you to the places that you need to be taken. Otherwise, Jesus would not have said, your gifts will make room for you.
Praise be to Allah. And that is, that's definitely going to be a clip we're going to put out there, because we need to hear that, because we would take ministry and put it within the box. And I think that's one of the reasons why the non-ministries have not launched, taken off like they should, because people hear the word ministry and then they begin to start just thinking that it's just supposed to be teaching from an actual rostrum. But I love the way that you explained that. And so also on the show with Sister Ava, you dropped some other serious jewels. You talked about how the value of the Black woman, and you stated the following quote, you said, when the Black woman is relating well to a man, that is when she becomes a true woman, and that is the process that they want to interrupt, because that is the powerhouse. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. In order to access the truth of who we are as male and female, we must be in proper relation to each other. Now, proper relation can be a marriage, it can be a family situation, or it can be as a community. But we must relate properly in the sense that by our interaction, we produce and pull from each other the divinity that's in each other. There are some things that will not come up out of you until you are attempting and working to relate to another person. This is the reason that he created us as families. We begin as a family and we evolve into tribes, and from tribes we become society, and from society you have a nation. Master Fard Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, articulated to us that he came to make us into a family, into his family. Well, what is a family? A family is a group of persons who are working collectively in a community environment by which they can achieve objectives and goals, by which they can nurture life in the form of children. They can nurture each other to develop and to grow into what Allah would have for them to be. You become a tribe by the fact that the people in the family marry other families and they bring them together. And now we're all working, inshallah, cooperatively with each other. That unit expands out even further to other aspects of the community. So in the church, we would say those who are attached to you, we're praying for you and those who are attached to you, meaning that they have a relationship with you in some way, shape, or form. Even if you're on a job, if you know somebody, you're exchanging electrical energy by way of thought with that person. From there, we develop into a nation which means that we're doing all of these things at a higher level, and we've involving commerce, we are involving economics, we're involving spiritual, educational development in an organized fashion. But you do not have a nation until you have a family. And from family grows what Allah would have us to produce in order to continue on in the form of children.
Wow, wow. And what, from your perspective, and from your study and your observation, what are some ways that this world is trying to pit Black men against Black women?
The inability of this world to effectively affirm Black men as men. That is the most important thing. The degradation of the woman to the point now that we have been turned, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would say, inside out, meaning that the natural use of the bodies, the natural use of each other has been turned into something other than itself. Therefore, when you have a man who is degraded and who is not in his rightful role as protector, defender, provider, leader of the family, you have the destruction of the community. There was a time when it didn't matter whether or not the person was the biological father. There was a time when the father or the man in the neighborhood or the brothers in the neighborhood, they had control of the neighborhood. That is gone because this society works to destroy the Black man. Because if you have an elevated Black man functioning as he is supposed to, then what you are producing is a nation of gods, because the woman will naturally incline to the Black man.
Wow. And, you know, of course, you see stuff on social media. And one of the things that I personally observed, I've observed that even some of us as members of the Nation of Islam, brothers and sisters, where we are getting caught up in these battle of the sexes. Like, from your study of the teachings, your observation of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, what advice could you give to us to help us not to fall into this enemy's trap of having us fighting one another outside in the community?
What I would say is go into the book of Revelations. It said that the dragon curled its tail. When you curl something, you create a contrary current, whether it's air or water. You create a contrary current, and as a result, the people are carried away by that contrary current. It's kind of like a riptide in the water. You have that undercurrent that pulls you under and takes you miles off the path. One of the things that we must learn to do is effectively and openly and honestly communicate. We have to get into a space of radical honesty, meaning that I am going to tell you exactly what I am thinking and how I feel. And that is a place of vulnerability for everyone. It's not to say that anyone has achieved that perfectly, but what it does mean is that what you see has to be what you get. Now, with respect to that, we have to change our expectations. We have unrealistic expectations based off of soap operas, romance novels, and movies and things of that nature. This is not going to be a fairy tale in that respect. Allah, when he self-created himself from triple stage darkness, the first thing that he did was he went to war with the darkness and forced it to give up the light that was within it. As women, we have to understand that the Black man is going to go to war with anything that inhibits him from becoming and having the environment that he wants. As Black women, we cannot be in a situation, as Brother Nuri always points out, you can't be at home fighting and out in the world fighting also.
Yo, do y'all still have that blog show?
No, sir, we do not. It's just time and circumstances.
Well, we might need to get that back up. We have to talk or something.
Yes,
so
sir.
My next question is, in very profound responses, sister, very profound.
Well, praise be to
Do you
Allah.
remember the first time you physically met the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and it was beyond, just beyond just a "Assalamu alaikum, brother minister," like where you had conversations with him? What was that? Can you talk about that experience and what stands out to you as you look back at it?
That experience was here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not at liberty to give details with respect to the conversation. However, what I can say is that there's never a moment where I have felt more secure and affirmed as a Black woman. He took all of my questions. I think I made him laugh a couple of times, which was awesome. But what I can say of my personal interaction with him on that occasion and on other occasions is that he is the living embodiment of peace and serenity. He is the living embodiment of what a student is. He is insatiably curious about everything. And that is something that as we grow and we are mechanized in this society, we lose our curiosity to know the other person. I believe him to be who he says he is. I don't know anyone who's walked away from an experience with him where you've actually had conversation with him, where he says your name and addresses you the same, because you cannot come into the presence of God in a man and walk away and think like the same old person. And I am profoundly humbled. I'm profoundly honored, and deeply grateful that he stood up, even though I know it has meant a massive amount of sacrifice told and untold on his behalf, that I would be able to sit here in 2020 and wear my headpiece and not be afraid, that I would be able to say I am an MGT and GCC because of that man. And so I'm eternally grateful to Allah for him. And I have nothing but praise for him. And I thank Allah for him every day. I do.
Wow. Praise be to Allah. Do you have any personal stories you can share regarding Minister Farrakhan where he's shared guidance with you about the position of the women in the Nation of Islam?
All of the guidance that I have received from him has been the same way that everyone else gets it, and that's through lectures and reading his words. I think the most important level of guidance that as a Black woman I've received directly from him actually has come in the form of his lectures to the MGT and GCC class. And I would encourage everyone to study deeply into Study Guide 19, because in Study Guide 19A and B, what you will find is the crystallization of the thought pattern of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as given to him by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable and Master Fard Muhammad about the role of the woman. And as men and as women, we have to understand that duality of nature, that every man has a woman in him and every woman has a man in her. And by studying that and using that as a base, you grow exponentially in terms of understanding the God who has come to save us.
Wow. What would you say? I know you talked about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's, how much of a benefit he's been to you, but I want to ask this question. What would you say has been one the most or some of the greatest impacts that he's had on your life personally?
Personally,
yes.
I will say this, that the deepest impact has been, and I do have one thing I can share. I asked him at the time, I just had my two sons, Hassan and Hanif. I asked him what to do with respect to raising them. And the best advice that I've ever been given came from him in that moment. He said, after a brief pause, he said, they already know what they're here to do. Encourage their interest. Encourage their interest. And it took me a minute to really catch up to what he had articulated. He said, just encourage their interest. They're going to show interest in things. Encourage that. And so as an MGT, as a mother, that is the road that I've taken with them. So I just posted on my Instagram the other day, my son Hassan has to build. He has to. He can go 2 or 3 days without building something, but I know at some point in time, he's going to construct something. It does not matter the material, he's going to make it. My son Hanif is very cerebral. He thinks very deeply. And so I remember my son Hanif at 3 telling me, Mommy, one day I'm going to build you a mosque and it's going to have 4 entrances. And so we had this really deep conversation about the 4 entrances to the mosque, where today at 10 years old, he told me just 2 weeks ago, I'm going to build a city and the mosque is going to be in the center. And the mosque will have 4 entrances. and nobody that's unrighteous will be allowed in the city so that you can be safe, mommy. How did that happen? And I want to interject this at this moment, that the role of curiosity development in our children very young in terms of the teachings is very critical. A lot of times we don't know where to start with them. I started with a story, and that story was a man drilled a hole in the earth and the moon went boom. And I would be so animated and we'd fall over and just have lots of fun. They were 2 and 3 years old. I do it now with my daughter, Habria, she's 2. Um, but that's how I started with them. So by the time my children were 6, 7 years old, they wanted to know, why did the man drill a hole in the earth? And from there, that's where the conversation with respect to the deeper level of the teachings came. To now, they are deeply interested in astronomy, engineering. They're interested in what I call theophany and theology. They want to know these things. They want to know how Master Fard Muhammad is Allah when his father was Allah. And so I did the classic, you get a glass, you have an empty glass here, a glass of water here, you pour it over here. The water does not change, just the container.
And that's it's interesting. That pattern that you use is the pattern that's found in the lessons with English lesson C1. It's put in such a way that the listener, after hearing it a certain amount of times, it will naturally make you ask questions.
That's right.
Like what you said earlier about how you have to study, because you can tell when somebody is studying the teachings, because you're going to naturally have questions, because we're being introduced to something that's been hidden for trillions of years. So beautiful response, beautiful response. So here's the question I would like to ask as well. If you had the opportunity, because you've had interaction with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, if you were selected to testify to the world about 3 qualities of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that you have experienced or you have witnessed, what would those 3 qualities be, and why those 3 qualities?
The first would be love, unconditional love. He is the first man. I was not here when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was physically present among us. He left when I was 5 years old. So the man that I have known is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I would say love, in that he demonstrates the totality of what love is. The nurturing, the caring, the kindness, the growth, the development, the discipline when necessary aspect of love. That it is a love supreme. It is an immortal love that springs from a well that is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Master Fard Muhammad themselves. It is a mother's love for a child, and for him to express that to us is beyond profound. The second, I would say, is intellect. I have never encountered anyone in all of my vast studies who is able to speak with certainty, and absolute precision on any topic that you put before him, which leads to the third quality, in that he is a student. Had he not studied so deeply into the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings and into the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a man, not just about, but of the man, truly getting into who he was, who he is, and who he has become. And so it's love, it's intellect, and it's being a student.
Wow, beautiful. And you talked about you have like in regards to library science. How has that helped you as a member of the Nation of Islam, and how has having that degree helped you to help the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
I think the most important thing that we have, and the internet is great and it's a wonderful tool, but at the end of the day, it's books. It's always been books. It's written literature. And so my respect for and my study into library science gives me a profound respect for the knowledge that has been given to us, and the need for what we call codification, meaning that it must be collected and it must be put in book form. Why? Because the book can go where the man cannot go. The book enters into the mind, the words. You enter into the thought pattern of the writer. And by doing so, you enter into, or that writer goes into the space of thought creation. Very, very critical. The minister speaks on the power of thought and closing the gap, which I would uh, urge everyone to read and to study deeply into. Thought. If I am there at the moment of thought creation, then I can direct the thought, because you begin with thought. Thought evolves into idea. Idea evolves into action. Action evolves into physical, concrete reality. So therefore, if you have righteousness at the moment of thought creation, then you change the world around you. And that is what is so critical. And that is where library science has helped me in knowing and understanding that precision and accuracy with the word, as I believe it's Second Timothy deals with rightly dividing the word. That is critical. You cannot quote the minister and say, I think. That does not work in this hour. We must be precise. We must be students. When you go to school, they want what's called a bibliography. They want to know where you pulled your information from, because I need to be able to go back and recreate it. And so therefore, if the man can't get into your mind physically, he can get there as a thought. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has told us, I am an idea, meaning that he has progressed beyond thought. He is now an actionable idea in those who claim to be his students.
Wow, wow, wow. And talking to your husband, you all had some involvement in regards to the re-releasing of the study guides, right?
Yes, sir. We spent.
Can you talk about that process?
Yes.
Let me put a layer of questions with that one. Can you
Uh-oh.
talk about how you all became involved? That's one. What was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's reaction to you all wanting to help to put them in the manner that they are in right now?
The reaction is that the books are out. So we'll take that. The involvement became, and this is the truth, Brother Nuri Muhammad, Brother Student Minister Nuri Muhammad, was looking for a way to compress the study guides. He had this massive, some of you may have had, he had this massive book of study guides. And we were working on another project, and he mentioned that it was costing so much to print this big book. And he was like, can it come down? Can we like make it smaller? And when we got into the study guides, we were like, wait, that's not in this. And so we went digging in crates and boxes, and you realize you got like 30 different versions of the study guides, because at the time, David will tell you that originally they were just Xerox copies of sheets of paper distributed. It had not been pulled all together. And so we're like, this is not, and there's something missing here and something's missing there. And so the call was made for the nurse, stop selling those because something is off here. Let me do some research. And so we engaged in almost a 2-3 year process of meticulously gathering and piecing it back together like a garment. And then it was turned over to Sister Ava Muhammad, who went through it with a microscope to ensure that everything was where it was. And even after all of the work that had been done, Sister was able to say that, wait a minute, there's some stuff missing. And from there, it went to the minister. And then literally 1 year later, Savior's Day to Savior's Day, it was out and available for purchase. And it is still available. FinalCall.com store.
Praise be to Allah. And I wanted to say thank you to you, your husband, and all those who are involved in helping to do that, because that's a great asset and great contribution to our nation. And I know with anything, just with life, in trying to do anything like that, you encounter difficulty, right? And like you said, it started off, it was almost a 3-4 year period. How did you and those involved, how did you all prevent difficulty from stopping you from accomplishing that goal?
During that first 3 year period, it was just my husband and I working on it. Nobody actually even knew. Brother Nuri was like, okay, I'll stop selling it. And, he went on continuing to speak and do other things. And we just worked on it. And I will say this about anything that has any value. I don't care what you're trying to do, start a business, go back to school, add a room onto your house. You have to want it, you have to desire it, and you have to love what you're doing. We wanted this for the minister out of respect for his words, out of respect for the fact that I personally believe that one of the things that he received while he was on the plane was the study guide written in his heart. Because if you look at the timeline, the minister goes up in the More Than a Vision experience. And 1 year almost to the date, he delivers the self-improvement lecture here in Phoenix, Arizona, the city of resurrection, as symbolized by the Phoenix. And we're off to the races from there. I believe it's November, December, when the first actual study guide, or what would become the study guides, makes its appearance in Chicago. So you have to love it. You cannot allow people with their negativity to come in and take you off course. You have to stay focused. You have to stay focused on the fact that this is bigger than me. And even though I am experiencing opposition, because Allah put it in my mind and in my heart to do this, that means that I'm the person that's supposed to do it. You can advocate your position if you want to, but Allah tells us clearly in his Quran that he will raise another people who will be more faithful and who will be believing and who will do the job that they are called to do. So with respect to that, how bad do you want it? And if you don't want it like a drowning man wants another breath, then you really don't want it and you need to walk away and leave it alone. But if you want it, then Allah will meet you in that desire, and whatever comes before you as an opposition, as David said, yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it's just a shadow. It's not real. It's an illusion. I'm walking through this. And by the way, let me point out, he's walking. If it was real, I think he'd have run. I think he'd have passed the same boat. But he is walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And that's the spirit that we have to have. You're a believer. Exercise your faith. And one thing that a very good friend of mine pointed out to me recently, that if the oil of anointing could come out of you by being crushed, that would be enough. But you are pressed down, shaken together. Okay, why? Because the oil comes out through the pressing. And what is the oil? I know that's not a language that we use all the time. The oil meaning the thought pattern to do righteousness has to be pressed out of us through trials. And so we say trials purify. What do they purify us of? They purify us from the fear and the apprehension of stepping out on faith and doing it. And so the minister told us, ask Allah for something big, something that only Allah can do, something that when you get it, you must give praise to Allah, and those around you will say, surely Allah has done this in this person's life. Why? Because it couldn't have happened any other kind of way. That's your testimony. That is your ultimate testimony. Allah did this.
Wow. Here's a question. Your husband says, he says she's a scriptural scientist, right? And I heard Sister Ava mention to you as she referred to you as a theologian. So yes. How do you manage or balance your study regimen with attaining degrees in Islamic studies with the responsibilities of performing your 7 units as an MGT and rearing children? How did you do that over the years and continue to do so?
It's all one and the same. The problem is that we divide these things apart. It's all one and the same. So as I am studying, my children are studying with me. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says in the flag of Islam that astronomy is the basis of everything. So my sons and I spend most nights, probably too late at night, outside looking up at the sky. We were able to see the No Wise Comet. A lot of people didn't even see the comet. I personally saw the comet 11 times. My children saw it around 15 to 16 times. Okay, even my daughter saw the comet, and she's 2 years old. We out at 9, 10 o'clock at night looking for a comet, because this is life. And so as we're outside looking up in the heat for the comet, we're talking about longitude and latitude. We're talking about the rotation of the planet. We're talking about why we pick through the navy beans. My sons know how to pick the beans for me. They help me cook navy bean soup because I need to make sure that they're able to eat properly. Because one day I am going to leave the planet and I'm not going to be able to cook for them. So they need to know how to cook. My daughter is involved in cooking. My daughter, I post pictures on IG of her on a regular basis. I'm teaching her how to sew. I'm teaching her the science behind Metatron's cube, which is a hexagon utilized in quilting, because I want her to understand that Metatron's cube is what they call in Kabbalah the tree of life, but as above, so below. And so I show my sons the sky so that they will understand that everything is an interrelation and it all came from us. So don't divide the things away. I make them a part of everything. My daughter will get a lecture while she's sitting in her high chair eating breakfast, because that's how I learn and I know and I check my understanding if I can talk to you about it. And so my sons and I, we would have intense conversations about Master Fard Muhammad and what he was doing. So like right before he figured out he was God, what was he doing? You know, those type of conversations. And yes, it's way out there, but they're 10 and 11 years old. And they're not interested in the world. They're interested in watching the minister. They're interested in, I will say this, Avatar, because they're like, well, if they could do it on Avatar, if they could airbend, I can airbend too.
Yo, you know what? I know a lot of people who are Avatar fans. They don't like the movie compared to the cartoon. I never really got into the cartoon. People have been telling me to check it out, but to me, that movie is good and has a lot of symbolism and a lot of principles that relate to our belief. Here's a question that came to mind: how did you like when you finally decided to join the Nation of Islam? How did your family respond?
It was visceral, and we're gonna move on from that.
Understood. So yeah,
we're gonna protect the living, okay? We're gonna protect the living.
So your husband, like I said, in preparation for this interview, I was going on pages and I remember when he started doing the 30-day expression of gratitude for you, right? He went from child rearing, from your studiousness, dressing like a Muslim woman. Like, how did that make you feel when you first saw him doing that on social media and for 30 days?
Embarrassed. Because I'm essentially a very shy person. So just embarrassed. Grateful, but embarrassed. So.
Embarrassed. What did he say when you expressed your embarrassment to him?
I don't even actually think I told him, because it would go here and then go over there and it'd be like, okay, she's talking. So once his mind is set on something, that's what it is. It's okay.
That's in the coverage coach, huh? So we're almost to the end. Oh, okay. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, during this last Saviors Day, during the laborers meeting, he talked about the book Closing the Gap. And he said how that book is evidence that he's got it from God. And you mentioned it, you talked about it earlier. What do you see? What are some, like, if you had to give some words to encourage believers to pick that book back up, especially it's in hard copy now, why would you tell us why we need to read that book?
I would say it this way. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we literally know 90% of his life. There's some things that happen, that have not been disclosed to the public. But as a nation, as Black people, we know up to the moment of his birth. We know the circumstances. We know what his mother was thinking. We know how she got past that. We know her prayers for him. We know him in a way that we have never known another human being. Okay. And so when you are in Closing the Gap, you are reading the natural progression of thought in a man who began as all men began, but who was grown and cultivated in his divinity. That is the path of the believer. The path of the believer. He opens a way for us. He gives us a guidance and a navigation point by which we can orient ourselves on the timeline of God, Allah, Master Fard Muhammad's purposes. He puts us in context by looking at his life. There's nothing that he has gone through that we do not go through or are not experiencing now. He deals with envy. He deals with how his own low self-esteem disallowed him to fully hear what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was saying about him and to him. He deals with how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tried him. He deals with his growth process into understanding the divine revelation that he has been given and that he's being guided into. And this is a critical point because we do not pop out as we are. Everyone is born with potential, but that potential must be cultivated. We have to receive in our minds the depth of what's in closing the gap, and that is a new electrical energy. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, when we look at the gifts of the Spirit as they are defined, there's one gift that's called healer. A healer is a person who can heal the body, but most importantly, all healing begins in the mind. A healer will give you a new thought. That new thought will change the electrical current of the mind and will illuminate the dark spaces in the person, which are in fact dis-ease, bringing healing, so that as we were taught prior to 75, that we used to glow. And we used to have what's known as that Muslim glow. We don't talk about that anymore. What is the origin of that? Yes, part of it is the diet, but most importantly, it's the thought process. So when we look at the minister, as it says in scriptures, when Jesus returned, they saw him as pure light. What is light? Light is energy. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the embodiment of the energy of God in a man before us right now. You have what are known as circuit breakers. Tesla discovered AC and DC, alternating currents versus direct current. We cannot take a direct current. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the circuit breaker that breaks down that direct current from the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, pulling the electromagnetism within those teachings and distributing it out to the believer in the form of his teaching. Closing the gap is exactly that. It takes you from being a human being, a regular person, inherent and endowed with potential, into what it's going to take to become a God. And so ultimately, you have to ask yourself, do I want to stay where I am, or do I want to live up to the potentiality of who I am? And that is God. You are an externalized thought of Allah right now. Allah was thinking of himself and he manifested himself in your form. You are not an accident. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is not an accident. He is divinely planned into existence. And so are we. If we would follow the roadmap that he has laid before us, through closing the gap, we will be able to navigate the vicissitudes of life much better. Not saying that we won't have things that come against us that discourage us, but at the end of the day, when things come against you, pause, but don't quit. Pause, but don't quit. You keep going. You keep going. And so they saw the angels ascending and descending on Jacob's ladder. The ascension comes from the fact that I have achieved another level of understanding. And as soon as you achieve it, you will go back down and you have to keep coming up. But you will never climb a mountain looking up at it saying that's a mountain. You have to get in it. You have to. And that process is self-improvement. And by self-improvement, we have closing the gap. And the gap between us and God is diminished. And so he says, I go to prepare a place that where I am, you may be also. That's closing the gap.
Be to Allah. So you mentioned it. This wasn't a question that I had prepared, but from your responses, and you mentioned it from your study of the supreme wisdom, what are some things that Allah has blessed you to see? Because I've noticed with believers that I know who read it and study it, that there are things that Allah reveals to us. Like what are some of the things that you have seen that you can share that believers can hear you and go back and start studying it themselves?
Assalamu alaikum, this is Kelly. I see you. Mother Tynetta, let's go there since she dropped the question. Mother Tynetta Muhammad was the one, along with Brother Jabril Muhammad. I had the opportunity to be under Brother Abdullah Muhammad, Brother Lucius Bia, some of the stalwarts and the greats of the Nation of Islam. By studying the supreme wisdom, you remap the mind. Okay. What are we saying by remap? You remap and relearn and unlearn simultaneously. Because what he is doing within the context of the supreme wisdom is allowing us to go into the why. If you are not dealing with why, then you're not learning. Why is the sun made of fire? Why are we 93 million miles away? Because the man drilled a hole in the earth and the moon went boom. We changed our orientation. What did that do to the planet? So when we look at the actual facts, for example, actual, as the minister says in the Gap book, it means that at the moment that that was written, that's what the reality was. Now, we have to take a proper assessment of where we are in the moment. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said that life is a recognition of Allah in the moment. So studying this supreme wisdom gives you a baseline of operations that in 1930 to 1934, roughly, this is what reality consisted of, okay? You have to study not just the supreme wisdom, but you also have to study the time that Master Prophet Muhammad came. He began coming 20 years before his self-revelation, or before he was recognized, to be more precise. Why is that important? Because when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that we needed to study what happened during the Black Plague, he also told us that we needed to study the Depression. Well, what happened during the Black Plague? During the Black Plague, again, in history, the feudal system was broken. What is a feudal system? It's how the poor and the wealthy related to each other. And as a result of the massive amount of loss of life and property transferred now to individuals who were not property before, it changed the entire economic, political, and spiritual reality of the time. The Great Depression did the same thing. The darkness that was in the minds of the people at the time, in particular Black people, mirrors the darkness that the first Allah self-created himself out of, which is further proof that Master Prophet Muhammad is who he says he is. He is God, Allah in person, because he's operating in the same dynamic that the first Allah was operating. And so when we go into the supreme wisdom, we begin to think and process information in the way that Master Prophet Muhammad is processing information. He is remapping our mind in order to receive a higher level of revelation. You can't talk to God if you're not talking his language.
Yeah, and this in the bear witness, there's a and I would like you to answer that question that the sister posted about Mother Tanetta. But before you do, Mother Tanetta came up with a method where you can read the Supreme Wisdom in 7 days, right? And there's a brother who I know in Atlanta. He's been doing it for the last 2.5, going on 3 years. And he said that he has begun to start noticing like how sharp his thinking is, and he's just reading it. And when I talk to him, I can tell. So it's a bearing of witness that if we continue to just read it repeatedly, we'll get it. So to the sister's question, and then after that we have one more question, and we'll let you. We'll end. But how was Mother, like the sister asked about Mother Tanetta being an example to you?
Oh my gosh, Mother Tanetta, and I'm not gonna cry. Mother Tanetta is the reason that I am an MGT. And I strive to be the type of MGT that I strive to be, in that I know how to dress because our mother showed me her closet. Well, what does that mean? Our mother traveled all over the earth and literally into the universe, truthfully, when we look at it, to discover and to find. She was insatiably curious. She was the consummate woman. As they say, they have Renaissance men. Well, she was the consummate Renaissance woman. She knew something about everything. Her guidance in terms of being a woman is invaluable to any person who wants to, any sister in particular, but any person in general. She's the most brilliant Islamic scholar. Her depth of study cannot be fully measured. Her body of work cannot be fully collected because it's still growing and evolving. You have to understand that there is a picture, and Sister Callie Muhammad in Columbus, Ohio. If you don't know that sister, I would encourage you to look her up. She was one of the first captains in the Nation of Islam. She can tell you about when Sister Christine was the national captain, and they would drive to Chicago, and they would have MGT class in the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's basement, and the minister would teach MGT class. Sister Callie blessed me to see and to understand there was a time when Mother Tynetta was down in the Amazon, I believe, and she had a machete and she's cutting through the jungle. Okay. This is important for every believer who feels like their work doesn't mean anything or what they're trying to do doesn't mean anything. Mother Tynetta was down there with a machete cutting through the jungle. Today, there is a road there where there was no road. She cut through that. And that, I believe, that story is emblematic of her entire life. She brought us into a sphere of understanding the divinity of the Black woman without being disrespectful and negating the Black man. It is her work and her desire that the sisters would see themselves truly as the second self of Allah God that is the motivator for myself and a lot of sisters out there. It is her being so courageous to study that a lot of the things that I have personally picked up over the years to look into, I would highly recommend a book called Mongol Queens. It's available on Amazon to look at the role of Genghis Khan's daughters in the establishment of his kingdom. Genghis Khan said that if you can run a household, you can run a nation. Mother Tynetta was the one who had me read that book. It's Mother Tynetta who had me and inspired me to go deeper into the study of Mary and her role and her activities from the scripture, and then looking at Mary from different cultural vantage points. Her value cannot be underestimated. She put me in the proper garments. She put me in the proper mental garment, if you understand what I'm saying. So everything, literally everything, I have learned as a woman, I've learned from observing and studying Mother Tynetta Muhammad. There have been other sisters who have been greatly influential on me. I do thank Allah I was blessed to come in. I came in with Sister Bessie Jean Farrakhan Muhammad was the national captain. And I've been blessed to have some powerhouse dynamic women involved in my life and in my development. And as they say, put their hands on me and mold me and shape me. And I can honestly say of all of them, not to negate them, Mother Tynetta has had the biggest influence on me and continues to influence me to this day.
Beautiful, beautiful. So your responses are so filled, and many people are saying that they're going to have this on replay and going to go back and read them. Watch it again. Before I ask this last question, for those people who are watching, please leave your feedback. Please type in the comments. Right. What have you gained? What are you gaining from this actual interview, this testimony? What's standing out to you? What is resonating with you? So my last question, sis, is, was there anything that you wanted to share or wanted to say, but you didn't get a chance because maybe I just didn't come up with the right question to bring it out of you? Is there anything?
Pause, but don't quit. What do I mean by that? Sometimes you have to take a break. Sometimes you have to take a break. You have to disengage for a minute. Disengage, regroup. Use this time now that we are in the chamber in order to fortify yourself spiritually. You look to your provisions, your food storage and things of that nature, but look most importantly to your spiritual self and your spiritual health. Because if there is anything that you don't understand or that you have a question about, now is the time to work it out, because in a minute we're going to be on Front Street. Everybody is not at the same level. Let us be honest. However, some people are not striving as hard as they could. Some of us are doing what we know in the church as backsliding. And it's because we have lost the energy. The fact that you cannot go to a building should not change who you are as a person. We have everything that we could ever want to have on the internet. You can find YouTube videos for the minister. You can watch a video from the minister from now until the day you drop dead, and you will not have exhausted his words. Pause, but don't quit. Now is not the time to give up. Now is not the time to quit. Isaiah says that God would not bring us to the point of deliverance and not deliver us. I'm going to say that again. God would not bring us to the point of deliverance and not deliver us. We are going to be the winners, living or dead. Master Fard Muhammad's will is going to be executed perfectly in his divine timing. And just because you ask for something and it hasn't shown up or manifested does not mean that your prayer was not heard and that the answer is not on the way. Perhaps you are the one that's the problem. Perhaps you haven't laid the foundation necessary to carry what it is that you're asking to carry. Remember, we all gonna get pressed. The oil, what's in us of these teachings will come out. And if you don't feel that you're in the best space, take the advantage of the chamber. We're being pressed down. We're having a collective threshing floor experience where what's in us that is not of Allah is being forced out of us. And so you have to make a decision at this point. You either going all the way or you're not going at all. And for myself, I'm going all the way. I will not turn back. I have been in this too long. I've put 30 plus years of my life into the nation, into being with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I come too far to turn back. And that's the attitude that you have to have. And you have to remember that even though no one has shined the light on you or no one knows who you are, always remember Allah is very aware of where his sheep are. He is very aware. You do not have to give up. You do not have to feel like you're unwanted or unloved. Master Fard Muhammad did not come all these miles to leave you. You have purpose. You were born for a reason, and greatness is within you. Go for it. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And so the minister on his Let's Change the World CD set, and I'll close with this. He has a song, Old Lang Syne, meaning that, and normally we sing it, you know, around New Year's and things of that nature. But when you look at the words of the song and you listen to the words of the song, you understand that when the old anxieties of the past begin to nip at you, begin to press at you, and it brings a heaviness to the heart, remember what you have been taught, because that's the key to the salvation. So where he is, we may be also. Inshallah.
Wow. Well, wait, can I ask you 3 more questions and now finally that's gonna be it? You good?
Yes, sir.
If not, we can stop. So
No, we're okay.
okay, so one, because you brought up, this was when I was you touched on it, and we started off, you was trying to adjust the CD set. Can you talk about the significance that you see in the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's CD set that we have changed the world?
Music, sound enters the ear and it stimulates thought and it changes the electrical polarity of the mind and the spirit. What he has given us is a new song or a new sound of revelation. And so when you listen to it, you are metaphysically and metabolically altered because a new sound is entering the ear. And it is pushing out the discordant, low level, low vibration sound of the music industry, okay? And so this is a sound that actually works to purify the hearer by what we are hearing. And if we study him the way that he studied Beethoven, the way that he studied Mendelssohn, he is able to quote unquote channel into these individuals, meaning he's able to enter into the ether through the Akashic records and pull in the emotional content of these great composers and produce the sound exactly as the composer heard it in their mind, inspired by Allah God to compose the works. This is an invitation to us to enter into the space of what the minister loves. And he loves his music. And so he has given us a gift, a song, a new song of revelation that will carry us through this hour. And so that's what it means to me.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you mentioned about the book Mongo Queens. Like, why should people go and read that book? And what did you see in that book? I have one more question after that, then we go.
Yes, sir. Mother Tanetta, when she had a group of us read the book, a lot of times when you hear about Genghis Khan, you hear about his conquests. Something that they don't tell you that Genghis Khan really did not stay in a place very long. Genghis Khan, his soldiers, the Caucasian developed through their war colleges the concept of scorched earth policy, but you see that perfectly executed under Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan would level a town. I mean, completely level it. And so once you do that 2 or 3 times, then you get what's known as propaganda. You send somebody out and you say, this is what happened to them. Do you want this to happen to you, or will you bow down and pay us the taxes? And so after a while, he didn't have to fully engage in warfare because his fame had spread so far. Now, ask yourself, his territory went from what is present day China all the way through the Soviet Union, and he actually would have what they call leveled or raised London, present day London and England. But you know what made him stop? They got to the outside and they said it stank so bad. And I mean that. You can look in the history books. He said the smell was so repulsive to them, they didn't even bother to enter into the city. I want you to get a map and I want you to look at from China all the way over to London and see how big that territory is. And then ask yourself, how could one man who was riding with his army constantly, living nomadically, run that? Well, he had 5 daughters. And those 5 daughters were either married in strategic marriages or persons were picked. It was still strategic marriages. Those daughters focused on what we know today as our training units in the MGT and GCC class. They focused on arts and culture, which was why you have the great cultural revolutions in these different areas. And if you look at what they've become today, those areas, then you can see the influence from there. And so when Mother Tanetta asked that we read the book, what she wanted us to see was that the role of the woman, it does no good for the Black man to go out and conquer a world if the household cannot be run. And the household or the domestic life is in fact everything that affects you domestically, whether it's in your house or down the street. We were all affected at the beginning of the pandemic when you couldn't find anything in the stores. That's domestic. Everybody was having issues. So Mongo Queens is something that you will learn the side of women and the role of women. And you will also learn parenthetically how women are systematically written out of great accomplishments in history, where so that it looks as though the man, and this is a completely European mindset, that it's just the man by himself without a woman helping. So his daughters, again, when his first daughter was married, he said at her wedding reception, if you can run a household, you can run a nation. So that's why I would say go read the book. I would also suggest that there's another book. It's called The Storm Before the Storm. It recounts what was going on in the Roman Empire prior to the Roman Empire's complete collapse. There's about a 30-year period of history that is very, very critical, and you will see significant parallels to this time. And the other book would be The Benedictine Option, whereas there are Caucasians right now who are exercising what is known as the Benedictine option. What is that? The Benedictine monks, they separated themselves out from the communities that they were involved in order to live a holy life. And so they call it the Benedictine option. The book was #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list for almost 36 straight weeks. And in it, what he talks about is strategic withdrawal. Well, what is that and why does that relate to us as Muslims? Because what they're talking about is separation. They are developing communities where in the center of the community is the farm, and the people live on the outskirts of the community, and everyone in the community works on the farm, and that's how they're able to eat. Strategic withdrawal, but it's separation. So don't tell me that we don't need to separate or that we can't separate. They made a decision. Honorable Elijah Muhammad says a message to the Black man, when you have 4 or 5 people who are of like-minded and who can unify based on that, then you work together. So there's no reason that 4 or 5 people can't go buy 50 acres. That's 10 acres apiece. You put the farm in the center, you put the houses on the outside, you do your own school. Strategic withdrawal. Or you could just get together and we could just go buy a town. They got a lot of them for sale. South Dakota, Wisconsin, pretty much the whole state is for sale.
Wow. There is, before I get to this last question, you made me think about when you're talking about the monks. You may have seen it. There's a documentary on Netflix. It's Free Country or something. I'll send it to you. But
Yes,
it was this Indian guru. It was in India. And he sent his assistant here. And they, in the area where white folks were saying it was inhabitable, they created their own community. They began to start taking land that was considered to be non-productive, and they made it productive, and even the animals came back. Now they got some wild, bizarre practices, but if we watch the first 2 episodes, we get it. But it's one of those other examples of a community's actions that we need to study as well, because me watching it, it showed I realized a potential consequence of us separating that I didn't think about, but watching this, like, yo, we got to prepare for that as well. And my last question is, July 4th, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave his yet another significant lecture to the world. Millions of people watched it. It drove the imposter Jews crazy, and it's driving them crazy now. What do you see as the significance of that lecture? And then we'll close out on that.
I want to start with the imposter Jews. And I want to say this, and I will get you the name of the book. There is an understanding that I believe we in the nation are missing. And that is that when you go into the scripture and you look at what exactly made them lose the favor of God, that's very important. It was their rebellion and it was their refusal to separate from Pharaoh. That's what caused them to lose the favor of God. That's very, very critical, because the minister has stated to us, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has stated to us, we need to study Israel. And I personally believe, and this is my opinion, that that is what we need to study. They received a direct order and they disobeyed the order. And these are the consequences as enumerated in the scripture. With respect specifically to that lecture, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan spoke in what is known as ex cathedra, meaning that he was the voice of God on that day. Absolutely and purely, in my belief, that what came through him, because he did not use his notes, was purely inspired in the moment. And when someone is speaking ex cathedra, that means that they are simply the mouthpiece of God in that moment. And so what he did was resolve the prophetic, the theological, the social, the political, all of it in one single lecture. If we do not hear from him directly again, that is the lecture, in my humble opinion, that will get us through this dark hour until he returns to us. It is that critical and it is that important. I pray a lot that it will be put in book form, so that the believing community and those outside of the community can read the words, because your mind thinks differently when you are engaging in books. And if I could just say this, I know that there are a lot of ebooks. There are a lot of ebooks and things out there available, but I'm saying this as a librarian and someone in education. You do not have the same educational experience engaging with the screen that you do with the actual book. Because with the physical book, you have the tactile experience that affirms what it is that you're reading psychologically. Okay, and it changes the depth of it, because turning the page, the physical action of turning the pages, the physical action of highlighting, of reading, of smelling the book, it activates all of the senses. And so it's a full and complete sensory experience. And I would encourage the believing community to go back to book form of things in reading. And so I'm overjoyed that Closing the Gap is out as a hardback edition now, because a hardback edition sets it apart from paper. because hardback books were for a long time a status symbol in culture and history and in the history of a book. The fact that you could afford a hardback book. So that is what I would say. Brother Willie, are you there?